My name's Sarah Greene and I'm an events director, and this summer 2021 I'm project lead on two huge events as part of the Olympics programme, which will be taking place later in the summer as part of the Welcome Back from Tokyo. And I'm going to talk about how I got to be there 25 years really from when I started in the events industry. So I grew up in a small rural county of Herefordshire, went to sixth form, knew that I wanted to be a student, didn't really know what job I wanted to do. All I wanted to do was travel. I did a social science degree, then just kind of really looked around for whatever work I could get where I could save up some money and go travelling. In those days, we weren't burdened with a lot of student debt, so it was quite a common thing to do for people just to mess around for a few years and not really think about working, so that's what I did. Took off to Asia, a couple of stints there, then did a year working in Australia, ended up in the States in a hostel in San Francisco where I saw a job on the notice board for an events assistant, a festival. So that looked good, and that's where my career started. They were Cajun and Zydeco festivals, which are an American folk music. I spent a season there as the assistant to the festival director, really doing a bit of everything, from volunteer managing to managing some of the artists, and I just absolutely loved it and really thought I'd found my niche. And then when I came back to the UK, started to think about, that perhaps this was a job and I could do this for a living. I was someone who'd always loved music, loved going to gigs, used to go to the Reading Festival, and it just never really crossed my mind that I could make a living out of it. So I wrote to three people. I wrote to Michael Eavis of Glastonbury, Melvin Benn, who was the festival director at the Mean Fiddler then, and Peter Gabriel at WOMAD, asking them for a job. And amazingly, 2 out of 3 of them wrote back to me and offered me a job. Glastonbury was part-time and seasonal, so I ended up being assistant to Melvin Benn at the Mean Fiddler, which is now called Festival Republic. They organise events. They still do Reading, they do Latitude, Download, various others. They're part of Live Nation, the world's biggest entertainment company. So it was a case of being at the right place in the right time. I'd had some good experience, and I think working in the States made me stand out. But essentially at that time, the model was really based around how Glastonbury was run. This was 1997, and at the time the Mean Fiddler were running festivals including Reading, Phoenix. They'd started off Creamfields. They'd been doing some of the first ever dance events and festivals in the UK. So I arrived at an amazing time. Bands were starting to earn a huge amount of money from live events. And I was really involved in every part of the show except for booking the artists. And I think that's something that people perhaps don't realise about working in live music, whether it's touring or festivals, is that actually booking the band's a really tiny part of putting the whole project together. There's the business side, ticketing, marketing, then the whole construction, production, tech, audience safety. I really didn't know very much about that when I started. I remember asking what a P&L, which is a profit and loss, was. Wasn't business minded at all. I think I taught myself to type. Computers had just come in. We didn't have the internet. We had fax. Really sort of hard to believe how a tiny team put together these huge, really, really complex events, which were welcoming, tens of thousands of people. We didn't really do anything under 30,000. So really quite extraordinary when I look back, and a massive learning curve for me. Then an opportunity arose to go and work in the New York office, which was essentially me. The company had been operating an Irish music festival called the Flower, which had been travelling across Irish American cities, and there were other ambitions to grow the company. Not everything came to fruition. And I think that's another thing to say about the events industry. There's as many events that didn't happen, never got off the ground or got cancelled for whatever reason, but those are the ones that nobody ever talks about, but you could spend a lot of time working on those. I came back to the UK and decided to try my hand at freelancing because I quite liked the idea of having some freedom and having some time off to do a bit of travelling in between. And I started producing the Left Field stage at Glastonbury. And then at that time I'd met my partner, I was in my early 30s, I was starting to think about children, and I really didn't feel that the events industry was compatible. Again, this is before, mobile phones, so, it wasn't that sort of 24/7 working remotely that was possible. I went to work for UNICEF, which is the UN Children's Fund, as their events manager, and really had an amazing time doing fundraising events with corporate partnerships. Got to see some great projects that we funded. It was a very different pace to working in a commercial, consumer-facing events division. So when I got a call from my old boss, Rob Hallett, who'd just started working for a company called AEG, who'd taken over the Millennium Dome with the O2, I was on my second maternity leave, but he made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So again, lucky to be with a company that had really just started in the UK. They were an American corporation, but the company grew really, really quickly. We were doing amazing tours for everyone. So I started at AEG. It was initially, I was a freelancer on a contract, but got taken on and became the director of events. And it was only really intended to be a short-term thing, but the company was growing hugely. They were doing really exciting things. The touring division was doing huge artists, everyone from Bon Jovi to Beyonce, and I was essentially running the special events division. So I took over Hyde Park Winter Wonderland, which had just started. It was a partnership arrangement, and I had had a great roles and great learning curve there, particularly on a business side, looking after everything from ticketing, marketing, booking some of the rides, bringing in some of the live entertainment, and really looking at how a whole event is put together right from the top through to the bottom, and the hundreds of stewards that we hired there every year. It was quite a different event model, free to enter, and like the ticketed shows I've worked on, and that became a bit of a sweet spot for me, is coming up with new event formats. We took Winter Wonderland to Dublin, worked on other seasonal winter shows, various other weird and wonderful projects, ranging from a Mandarin opera with Damon Albarn. And then sadly we lost the winter contract at Hyde Park, but gained the summer contract in Hyde Park. So I spent 10 years in one of the most famous parks in the UK. AEG was awarded the contract to run the summer concerts there. I was booking a lot of the family entertainment, and what we did that I'm really proud of is we offered a lot of community pieces there. So with 2 weekends of live shows, big live arena shows back to back, we opened up the event space during the week in between and offered a lot of either free or low cost entertainment, which became known as Open House, which is a really great model that's carried on to other festivals I've been involved in. So a growing part of my experience in the events industry has been working with brands and brand partnerships. There's always been sponsors, whether it's a beer sponsor or a radio sponsor, but I think brands know that the live event experience is a great thing, so it's a brilliant way for them to sell in their brands and have that association. So after 10 really, really happy years with AEG, I was offered redundancy, and it was time to take a bit of a break from what's been what was a really, really full-on period. So I took a little bit of time out, and then started looking around for some contract roles. And at that time there was an agency called TBI Media who was starting to take media brands into the event world, and I was event director of the BBC's first festival for kids, which happened up in Liverpool. Really great experience of bringing together everyone from Mr Tumble to Operation Ouch show, BBC owns some of the best assets for kids in the world, but putting on an event, aimed solely at children and all those safeguarding pieces really brought home the responsibility you have, the more senior you get up the events ladder for the people that you have attending your event. So that was a 1-year contract. I was offered a corporate role, which, I definitely took a second to think about. I hadn't worked in the corporate sphere, and it was with the CoOp, as in the supermarket and the funeral care brand. But they were doing really exciting things with their brand, operating pop-up supermarkets at the big UK camping festivals, which were, great business move, really, really popular at festivals. They since announced a partnership with a new arena up in Manchester, and really wanted to take corporate events, which can be, I realise, quite dry, and introduce a bit of rock and roll pizzazz to them. A great company to work for. I really believed in their ethos, but ultimately I was up in Manchester and not able to work from home very much. So, unaware of the pandemic that was about to unfold, I resigned. And 3 months working my notice, found myself out of work for a period. So 2020 and 2021 has been a really challenging year for lots of industries, but I think the events industry, which is really all about bringing people together, often in really, really huge numbers, it's been very, very challenging. But I think the appetite, is out there. So for anyone wanting to go into the industry, it's a great time. There is going to be a roaring 20s and a booming time. So if you have a passion for events, 2022, go for it. I think in the events industry, it's a cliche, but it's a real people industry. I think you have to be interested and excited to work with a really diverse range of people, everyone from a local farmer through to a band manager, and also really understand an audience and how you're able to provide an event that meets that audience needs. It's experience, without a doubt. I can talk a little bit later about qualifications, but I think having worked on events, whether it's your school fete or organising a holiday for you and your mates, they're all events, they need some organisation, whether it's local arts festivals, events that you might have volunteered within a more official role, that's what somebody would be looking for when you apply for an entry-level role. I would say a basic third level education is really useful. I think there's some great event management degrees out there. I didn't do one, they didn't exist when I started. I think maybe a few people had worked in hospitality. So I think any sort of basic degree with GCSE, maths and English is a good starting point. I mean, the sky's the limit really, but I think, as with many careers, there would be an expectation of working as a volunteer or as an intern. I think a lot of the entry-level corporate charity sector work would start around the sort of 20,000 in London. I think where the huge money is to be made is where people take risks on events themselves, put their own businesses, their own houses on the line to promote shows, but it's that's quite a long journey and you need a lot of experience under your belt to do that. I think long-term career prospects are great, probably much better than when I started out. I think a career in events probably didn't even exist. I didn't really know what it was. So, and I think there is a very defined path now, whether it's going into venue management, you could go into wedding events. There's a lot of areas that those skills can be used that are transferable across different businesses. I think a lot of people that work in events work freelance. So, there is a freedom there where you might be, if you're working on a summer festival, working all summer long, but you might have the winter off. I mean, I think if you're in-house, working for a corporate events company, it's more of a sort of salaried role, so there'd be the kind of standard holidays. But I think all of the companies that I've worked for, the great freedom comes from if you've got a really great idea that you think will make the business money. There's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit in events, and that's generally supported. Most events, most public-facing events these days have partners in brand partnerships, drinks partners, electronics partnerships, and all of those brands have activations and live experiences outside of events. So that's another possible route that you could go, working with a brand agency. So if you really don't know where to start in events, I think the first thing I would say is make sure you go to events, attend as many as you can, even if they're not necessarily your thing. Just have a look around. I think it gives you a really good sense of what's going on, even if it's a fun fair, which is free. There's lots of good trade magazines that operate free online, that have free mailing lists. Three I look at almost every day are Standout magazine, Access All Areas, and then IQ magazine, which is more music and European focused. There's loads of great trade organisations connected with events. Again, some of them you will have a free website that you can have a look at, or newsletters. Two I'm going to call out particularly for outdoor festivals are the Association of Independent Festivals and the National Outdoor Events Association. And then finally, in terms of work experience, the good news is that most large events, and certainly every single Greenfield festival I know, will hire volunteers. You might get fed and watered, and you might not have to work that much, but you will essentially get a ticket to a great festival. There's several charities do this, Oxfam being probably the biggest, and then there's several agencies that offer work in exchange for an event ticket, and I'm calling out one that I know quite well called Fest Staff. So my final thought is, I think, for the events industry, you need to have a passion for events. You need to love going to them. You need to love weddings, festivals, whatever it is. That's how you want to spend your time and money. Go and get yourself some experience. There's loads of opportunities to do it. And even better, why don't you go away and set up an event for yourself? Could be something like a street party, could be, a get together for your friends in the park. I think, doing that and treating it as a professional piece will really help you.